everyone. This is Jackie Cooper with the Crypto Mom 2 Talk Show and the Blockchain Legal Institute Talk Show. And I'd like to welcome everyone to this episode and definitely remind you to like and subscribe because there are some wonderful conversations in the queue. And I'll be sharing those talk shows shortly. I feel as if the last few weeks I've been learning so much about DAOs, and I know that the individual who I have on today is knowledgeable in many, many areas, and one of the areas that we'll be talking about is the area of DAOs and incorporation and alternative things that you need to be thinking about when you are in a decentralized community. So before I pop over to him and the story about this wonderful digital economic zone, I wanted to share a little bit of history about myself and the Blockchain Legal Institute in case you are new to the feed, and we welcome you. So my background is both as an educator and author of the Bitcoin Cinderella series, as well as a lawyer. And I'm the CEO of the Blockchain Legal Institute, which is actually a centralized library for our decentralized resources in this community that we are living within. So within the Blockchain Legal Institute, you can find information about artificial intelligence, Bitcoin, and I'm a Bitcoin miner, Ethereum, blockchain use cases, DAOs, Metaverse, Web3, you name it, the resources are there, news, events. It's a changing world, and because most of the information is decentralized, it's kind of hard sometimes to find resources. So that's why BLI was created, to save you time and also provide you diverse resources. We have many partners who are part of our network, and one of our partners is actually the Catawba Digital Economic Zone, and we came to be aligned actually at a conference in Miami, the Bitcoin conference in 2023. And when I was sharing the Bitcoin Cinderella and the Seven Dwarves book that I wrote about Bitcoin, and we realized that there was a lot of synergy with what we were trying to do. And so the Blockchain Legal Institute at that point was brand new, had not even formed yet. The idea had just been given birth. So that's part of our origin story. But we realized that what the economic zone is doing is really important, and we wanted to be part of its journey as well. So with that, I do invite you to go back into the feed because we've had a few conversations. But today I have Joseph on, and I want to welcome you to the BLI talk show and the Crypto Mom 2 talk show. How are you doing today? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you so much for inviting me on the show. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So why don't you go ahead and share a little bit more about who you are and what your journey has been to come to the place that you are at right now, and then also just the history of the economic zone, because it's very special, and I really encourage everyone to support what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, my name is Joseph McKinney. I've been in the what we call the startup society space for the last several years. Startup society being any form of new community that's experimenting with new forms of governance. Big examples of that are special economic zones, such as Shenzhen, or many that are in Dubai, as a consequence of these zones that have different policies that make them more attractive for businesses and residents to relocate there. They have scaled from either fishing villages or deserts essentially into global powerhouses of cities within mere decades with the same GDP as many nation states. And there's actually thousands upon thousands of special economic zones all around the world. And there's been this emerging trend of entrepreneurs building more innovative special economic zones. So we developed a nonprofit of different entrepreneurs that are bringing together best practices to make sure that they can build these to not only work, but also be beneficial to the communities that are around them. And to do that, we created a nonprofit that did trade shows and popular content, but we also launched the only active peer-reviewed journal in the space of special jurisdictions and startup societies, as well as a how-to guide. And in parallel to that, I started consulting different projects around the world. And one of the projects that came across my desk was the Catawba, because there was a Catawba Special Economic Zone team. And I'm going to be honest, I kind of rolled my eyes initially. In the special economic zone space, people normally don't really believe that a true special economic zone can happen there, because prior to this, there wasn't. And also, people, especially who don't have a legal background, don't actually know to the extent that tribes have sovereignty. And that, frankly, I didn't believe that they had any. I'm happy to report I was totally and completely wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Tribes are sovereign, and in regards to commercial law and business regulations, they have at least the same level of authority as a U.S. state. So essentially, a tribe can craft framework that could essentially be a competitor to, let's say, Delaware, which is known as like the jurisdiction for remote company corporation or having a business because of its steady legal framework. But a tribe could potentially do even better because they have the incentives similar to a startup, that they are nimble, they can be more responsive, versus a state can move, a lot slower. So with this sort of a legal analysis in mind, we secured a joint venture with the business arm of the tribe to develop the special economic zone. And then we engaged with the tribal leaders as well as their attorneys to develop a legislative package, an enabling act, which would push the zone into law. And this is actually the legislation right here. And we worked on it with them. And in parallel to that, and arguably way more importantly, we engaged at the grassroots level with tribal elders and heads of families and just sat down with them at dinner, lunch, and breakfast, just explaining step by step with printed materials, what exactly is a special economic zone? How is it beneficial? Why is it good to attract businesses that are in the fintech and digital asset space, et cetera? And as a consequence of that, we developed a grassroots movement for a special economic zone in the United States. And as a consequence of that, the Catawba actually actively championed the project and motivated their government to secure a special session of their nation's legislature, the General Council, which kind of serves sort of like a referendum style democracy. And then they put this up for a vote, and it was voted overwhelmingly into law on February 19th of 2022. And what the law, you can't really see this very well, but that's fine. You'll just get the broad strokes. What this law enabled was, for one, the creation of two different bodies. One is a fully a government body, similar to a Secretary of State / financial services regulator. It's an instrumentality of the nation itself, and it promulgates regulations at the same level as the U.S. state. The additional body is a for-profit management company that is majority owned by the Catawba Indian Nation, responsible for financing as well as marketing, software development, and business development for the zone. And that's the organization that I'm the CEO of. That's accountable to a Catawba majority board. In addition to that, it enabled a commercial code based on model text. And if you're an attorney, which it sounds like a lot of your viewers are, you'll be familiar with a lot of these model acts, such as ALI's restatements of agency, or the Uniform Law Commission's UCCs, as well as stuff from the American Bar Association, and includes corporate entities and what have you. So basically, if you are an attorney in the United States, you have either these books on your bookshelf, or you've read them in order to pass the bar. So everything that you're familiar with. And presumably, it actually makes a more competitive environment, because if normally there's sausage making when it comes to states, that when you add in the model acts, then that's where you get the special interest laden provisions. We have none of that.
That's amazing. I'll definitely have to make sure that those are uploaded over to the Digital Economic Zone's partner page, so that way individuals who would like to read that information definitely can, because that's fascinating.
So that's all available online. So if you go into governance and you go into enabling legislation, you can see the full code, and you can see the links to the actual model acts themselves. And if you're, yeah.
I have a question for you and your own personal story. How did you become interested in the area of economic zones and that whole area? Because that to me is fascinating. It sounds like you definitely have a global perspective. aside from the partner that we're talking about. So how did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I studied politics and I was moderately involved with local politics, and I thought that that was probably the best way to cause a positive social impact. But the more I got into it through study and through practice, I quickly realized that not only would I be miserable doing this, I would also accomplish very little and probably even potentially cause bad. So I started realizing at that same time that entrepreneurs were causing more positive social impact than politicians were, and realized, why don't I try something where we test out the types of institutional ideas that we normally put in policy, but just test it out and have it scale. And we were seeing that with Uber and Airbnb and social media giants and what have you, with the Arab Spring and what have you. And also emergently, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So started initially, a cryptocurrency startup with related to crowdfunding. But as I was doing that, me and my founder, we came to recognize special economic zones as the fullest extension of this type of, don't argue, build mentality. And we realized that there was a space open to help promote and connect different entrepreneurs in this emerging industry.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, I already can see a variety of other talk shows related to that, just because of the fact that I think a lot of the BLI members and those that are following Crypto Mom too might not have a background knowledge about these zones. And even though I've come across them before, like in UAE and other places, but again, it's I think that this definitely it requires exploring. So let's go back to the digital economic zone that's in the Catawba Nation. So let's talk more about who they are and their projects. I'm going to share uh, their their website, and that way we can kind of do an exploration of their background. So as I kind of scroll on up, everyone be patient with my cursor here. For some reason, it's very slow. All right, so we have the platform, and I see the governance, I see incorporation, banking, media, Native Americans, the network, and invest. Which area would you like to talk about first?
So let's talk a little bit about governance. I think that might be
Yeah.
interesting. It also coincides with where we left off with the story. So yeah. So click on that.
Yep, I'm
And
trying.
okay.
It's everyone. It's not their website. It's my cursor. So it's
Well,
all.
I'll just speak to the regulation as you
Yeah.
are clicking it. So, since the law was passed in February of 2022, our regulatory body, the Zone Authority, was very busy. So we stood it up, and it is headed by five Catawba commissioners that meet about every 2 weeks, which, compared to Wyoming, whose legislature meets every 2 years to discuss new legislation, we can always be quicker than they are. And they establish, for one, an administrative procedure regulation similar to the APA that's used by all US states. In addition to that, they pass two different digital asset regulations. One was an improved upon version of Wyoming's set of definitions. In
Interesting.
addition, yeah. And in addition to that, we were the first jurisdiction to adopt the Uniform Law Commission's amendments to the UCC, Article 12. And we actually have both that work in tandem, because one of the criticisms of Article 12 is that it is very broad.
Yes.
So it's helpful that it fits under the UCC, but if you're looking for clarity under existing law, you want to have some exact definitions. So we have some of the good neutrality and interoperability with the U.S. legal system. In addition to that, we have some of the more concrete elements that Wyoming brings to the table. So the best, arguably, jurisdiction in the United States for clarity about digital assets under commercial law.
So I am scrolling. For everyone who's on the video side, you can see it. For those that are on the audio side, definitely the links will be embedded, so you can go and you can explore yourself. DAOs, legal wrappers. Tell me a little bit more about this area, because I know that that is just like AI. It's sort of the trending thing that people are talking about right now to incorporate or not incorporate. Share a little bit more about your knowledge about that.
Yeah, first and foremost, you should definitely incorporate, because if you don't incorporate, the government will incorporate for you. Um, Um, and I'm speaking to a very specific example, and there's others that are happening around the way. But OkiDAO, which was a DAO that was sued by the CFTC, and it was served in Discord because they were under the illusion that simply because they don't have a legal wrapper, so to speak, a legal entity, that they would be immune from suit of the government or from individuals. But not only is that not true, but they actually said that they were a specific legal entity, an unincorporated association, which for attorneys out there, that's a horrible situation to be in if you are part of that organization, because that means you have unlimited liability. It's like a general partnership. Versus if you have a legal wrapper, you will have limited liability, which means that your liability will be limited to the amount that you put into the company. And then in many cases, it'll have the entity itself will have its own corporate liabilities. So that's very important. However, we want to make sure that your legal wrapper isn't restraining what a DAO is. The whole point of a DAO is that you experiment with different governance structures and have some flexibility in that, and have the community govern it. And a lot of these different legal codes aren't exactly built for that type of decentralized internet native companies. So what you need to do is focus on different legal entity types that provide that flexibility, while at the same time creating regulations that optimize for how it can be a good DAO. So we passed a DAO regulation based on an improved upon version of Wyoming, in which it provides greater flexibility than the Wyoming framework, but it also allows for recognition under the existing U.S. legal framework and limited liability, et cetera. In addition to that, we passed a regulation that will allow for the formation of an unincorporated nonprofit association DAO, which has even greater flexibility. That will be enabled when we issue our decentralized identifier and verifiable credentials, because unlike an LLC, which is an incorporated entity, an unincorporated nonprofit association is more akin to a general partnership in the sense that it isn't a legal entity. It's a bunch of individuals working together. However, unlike an unincorporated association, like I just mentioned, it does have limited liability.
That is, I really want to say it's a mouthful, but it's something that is really important for everyone to think about. And again, do you have lawyers that they can reach out to within the zone to help with this? Or how does that, if someone has no clue what to do? I know, obviously for those that are listening, you can reach out to the Blockchain Legal Institute because there are lawyers who are already members, but within the economic zone, how do you help people who don't know how to choose?
So we do have attorneys within the zone. However, you don't normally go to the state of Delaware and ask how to use your law. You have to retain your own representation. Also, just for clarity, I myself am not an attorney. I just play one on TV. I work with good legal staff, and we listen to best practices. So.
But there is someone on staff if someone wanted to call and ask questions, at least.
Sure, we could talk about in broad strokes.
In broad strokes, always in broad strokes, and you definitely have to get your own personal attorney to file the papers and things like that. So I know that the zone is growing, and again, you might have to talk broadly, but there on the website it does talk about banking. It talks about other areas. Why don't you go ahead and share what's going, 2024, there's a lot of development going on, and why don't you share a little bit about the projects that are going to be opening up for people to enjoy?
For sure. I mean, like I mentioned, it looks like we'll be launching our DID and verifiable credential in 2024, which will allow for the formation of unincorporated nonprofit associations. That would be based on a Bitcoin DID, using that chain. And you'd be able to verify initially whether someone has passed KYC. So you'd have an individual credential, kind of like an e-residency. And eventually we would like to also associate that DID and verifiable credential with each of the companies incorporated in the zone, kind of like a decentralized digital version of a certificate of good standing. And then that can be used outside of the jurisdiction, so people can verify companies and individuals that they have been past KYC and are governed properly under the zone. In addition to that, we're moving really forward with banking. So in addition to the regulations I mentioned a couple months ago, we passed our banking regulation, which is a large feat. When people think about tribal sovereignty, they rarely think about, setting up companies, let alone setting up banks. But tribes, being at the same status as the U.S. state, have the ability to charter financial institutions. So what we did is, like every good attorney, they stand on the shoulders of giants, taking texts that are already used and battle tested, and improving on the edges and making sure that it's reducing red tape. So what we did is that we borrowed liberally from the banking code of South Dakota, which is has the most assets under management of any other state charge system in the United States, as well as a little bit of North Dakota, because they have the Public Bank of North Dakota, and likewise there would be a public bank within the zone under the code, as well as a little bit of Wyoming because of some of their innovations in regards to special depository institutions, as well as the custodianship of digital assets. So that has been passed. We are very close to setting up our banking commission, which is a panel of experts that will review charter applications, and we're confident that pretty soon that people will actually be applying to different charter applications, and we have several different organizations that have given us written interest in setting up a charter within the zone. And then after that, they'll have a charter, and we'll be working with correspondent banks to make sure that they can provide services on day one.
That is phenomenal how you have pulled, I would say, the best from different pieces to blend and create something that is diverse enough to meet the needs of our community. I look forward to reading the legislation and the information that you've shared, as I posted on BLI as within the library, because I love doing the reading, because it helps me, because I think that I write the Bitcoin Cinderella books, and one of the next books is going to be all about DAOs. So within that book, I'll be probably having Samantha visit the zone and go other places where DAOs are mentioned, so she can kind of have her adventure around the world and within the online version of a DAO. So that's why I have to read all this, because I have to do the research in order to be able to write it for others to understand it. So it's a very exciting time that we live in. I know that you have many hats, and where do you see the future of this going? I'm curious, there's a lot of different legislation that's happening in the United States community and other parts of the world. I have my own opinion of the nature of the zone and how it can be actually a home for the creative decentralized world that we live in. But where do you see these zones fitting, and how do you see them actually being safeguards for some of the creative industries that are being developed within blockchain, crypto, and that type of thing?
Yeah, totally. I mean, they're the same. The Catawba Digital Economic Zone exists for the same reason that special economic zones happen in Shenzhen. And for a little historical context, the special economic zones happened in China, which later led to their liberalization, partially because China did not want to liberalize their economy on a grand national scale. They felt, and probably rightfully so, if they did that, that would be the collapse of the Communist Party and destruction of a lot of institutions. So what they did is instead they tried out an experiment, so to speak, in these different little areas and tested them out and scaled them, kind of like a sandbox. Likewise, in the United States, it's very unlikely that there's going to be any substantive legislative clarity, and as a consequence, regulatory clarity before the end of 2024 and probably going into 2025. And as a consequence of that, especially since now the bull run has already started even prior to the halvening, it is crucially important that there is a a regulated jurisdiction within the United States that will be able to effectively govern this new spur in the technology. And not just from a point of just making sure that the industry grows, but also protect and safeguard against its excesses, as we're all abundantly aware of.
Mhm.
You need to have, in order to be regulated, you need to have a regulator that actually starts. And that's one of the fundamental problems that happened in the last bull run, because there was a lack of regulatory clarity. It wasn't that, they performed better or they were in the United States. What they did is that they went to the Bahamas and did whatever they wanted, versus having a jurisdiction within the United States that obeys the best practices and standard laws and regulations that other US companies do, but at the same time recognizing the role of digital assets and fintechs and being able to nimbly govern as is appropriate. That is a way to not only allow for the industry to grow, but to ensure that it doesn't turn into I have an inappropriate word in my head when I'm talking, when I'm thinking about this, a bad time. It's going to prevent a bad time.
I get it. I understand. I understand. Everyone who's listening, I definitely want to thank you for listening. I'm going to definitely have all the links, embedded within, so that way you can reach out to the zone and find out how you can incorporate there, or, how you can do business there, because there's a variety of projects that, you can tie into. I'm going to share, just for a quick second, the Blockchain Legal Institute's website, just to kind of give you a flavor, but also because of the fact that we are going to have an event on March 21st. Now, you might be listening to Joseph and our conversation after March 21st, because these conversations, stay on our feed forever. But if you do visit and you want to register for the free event, we have these global broadcasts twice a year, in October, which we had the last one, and also in March. So, for sure, definitely be visiting Blockchain Legal Institute, so you can learn more about a variety of topics. And as I scroll down here, hopefully I can scroll. Yep, I can scroll. And we had our last event broadcast on October 24th, and you can again register for the upcoming broadcast. And we are going to be doing 3 very important topics. Panel 1 is about real world assets and blockchain integration. Panel 2 is about global perspectives of blockchain law, which is ever changing. And panel 3 is about DeFi and the transformation of financial services, which also includes conversations about traditional banking. And I know that, just from our conversations, these digital economic zones need to be taken into account, because they are also part of the foundation of the freedoms that why decentralization has been created, is to provide the economic freedoms. So any last minute thoughts that you would like to share before we sign off?
No, just join us on our journey to disrupt Delaware, and we'd love.
That might be the title of our talk show then.
Perfect. Yeah, that's definitely our tagline. And yeah, we're happy to help protect your digital assets and provide you regulatory clarity for this next bull run.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate everything that you and the zone are doing. I'm glad that we met at the Bitcoin conference. I know that you and I will the 2 different entities will definitely be there at the Bitcoin conference in 2024 in Tennessee. I have another 2 Bitcoin Cinderella books coming out: the Bitcoin Cinderella and the Pink Sands Treasure of Bermuda, which takes place in Bermuda and talks about the fintech community there. And then the one that I'm really also excited about is the Bitcoin Cinderella and the True Stories of Women in Bitcoin. And I've been interviewing women in Bitcoin for the last few months, and I can't wait to share their stories and their journey, because again, we've all had a different experience with Bitcoin, and the last 13 years has been wonderful. So Everyone who's listening, again, thank you so much for being on. As I always say at the end of all my shows, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. We're all so interconnected. We're all part of one world, and today even more than others. Thank you so much, everyone. Talk to you soon. Bye.